The first thing he notices isn't the men. It's the wolves. Low growls rolling beneath the storm, white breath curling from their mouths in the cold. And the one on his left, the one with the scar behind its ear, he raised that animal from a cub. Now its teeth are aimed at his throat. Vaelric doesn't move. Not from fear. He's trying to understand. Rain hammers Carvain Ridge. Gravel slides beneath his palms where he landed. Cold water rushes around his knees. 6 men stand above him in a broken circle, mud on their boots, water dripping from their sleeves, and none of them reach down to help him up. These aren't soldiers prepared for battle. They're prepared for something else. One of them points. Stay down. Vaelric looks at the hand. Just looks at it. The same hand that raised a silver cup beside him during winter oath ceremonies. The same man who laughed at his left side during a feast 3 weeks ago. The storm swallows whatever used to exist between them. He plants one hand against the rock and rises anyway. The wolves surge forward instantly, snarling. One snaps close enough that spit catches his cheek. Not one man steps between him and the animals. That hurts more than the fall. His eyes find Rowan across the circle. Say it. Rowan's jaw tightens. He looks older than he did 3 days ago. Not in lines. In something behind his eyes. You were ordered to leave before dawn. Vaelric almost laughs. The sound that comes out is close, sharp, and empty, and gone before it means anything. Ordered by who? Nobody answers. A wolf circles behind him. Slow. Deliberate. Hurting him. The realization doesn't arrive with panic. It arrives quietly, the way truth does when it's been obvious for a while. This was arranged. Not tonight. Long before tonight. Boot steps crunch across stone. Every man straightens before they see who's coming. That instinct alone tells Vaelric everything. Commander Malrec emerges through the rain wearing a soaked black cloak. No torch. No weapon. The men part for him without being asked, not out of fear, out of habit. And watching that happen, the way it happens, sends something cold sliding beneath Vaelric's ribs. Malrec stops a few feet away. He doesn't speak immediately. Rain falls between them. The wind tears across the cliffside. And in that pause, Vaelric finds himself studying the man's gloves. Water drips from the fingers. Patient. Like he's done this before. The council has spoken. Vaelric holds his stare. The succession ends here. The words disappear into the storm almost before they're finished. But no one breathes after them. Like everyone present understood them better than he did. Vaelric's eyes move past Malrec to the men standing behind him. Not one argues. Not one looks surprised. A muscle jumps in Rowan's throat. They knew before he did. And that understanding, that single, quiet understanding, does something to him that betrayal alone never could. He doesn't feel anger. He feels the world shift half an inch beneath his feet and never quite settle back. This isn't exile. Exile leaves a road home. The wolves tighten their circles. Behind the men, the cliffs of Carvain disappear into fog. Water crashes far below the ridge, loud enough to tremble the stone. Across the valley, Valderin flickers faintly through the rain. The throne towers barely visible, distant as a memory. No royal banners move on the ridge roads. No silver guard rides north. No signal fires burn on the mountain walls. His father sent nobody. The absence lands heavier than chains. Vaelric looks at Rowan. Say it. I already said it. Not that part. Rowan looks away. Thunder cracks above Carvain. Malrec steps closer. Lowers his voice like proximity makes honesty easier. You should have accepted the decree quietly. Vaelric keeps staring at the city lights far below. Was it signed before or after you surrounded me? The commander says nothing. That silence is the answer. Then, far below the ridge, a horn sounds across the valley. Long, heavy. The men stiffen instantly. A second horn follows. Closer. Urgent. A third cuts through the storm before anyone speaks. Not ceremonial. Not routine. Vaelric watches the wolves react first. Ears flattening. Restless pacing. Low whines threading beneath the sound of rain. Animals understand panic before people are willing to name it. He watches Malrec's face instead. The commander's expression changes. Only slightly. A small tightening around the eyes. The kind of adjustment men make when something goes wrong that was never supposed to happen. Then the valley glows. At first it looks like lightning caught beneath clouds. Then another flare rises. And another. Orange spreading through the rain-soaked dark across Vaelric eastern districts. Fire. Not one fire. Many. A younger warrior steps backward. No. The word barely makes it out of his mouth. Faint screams drift upward from below. Thin, broken things carried on the wind, and for a moment nobody on the ridge can speak. Everything changes shape at once. The wolves stop growling. The men stop looking at Vaelric like prey, because all of them are looking at the city, at the smoke climbing into the storm, at the eastern gates disappearing behind flame. Vaelric turns sharply toward the valley. That's too fast. He doesn't need to explain what he means. Nobody asks him to. Vaelric looks at him slowly. And for the first time since they forced him to his knees, the weight shifts. Not away from him. Onto all of them. You already made your choice, he says. His voice stays quiet. Almost gentle. Another horn blast rolls across the mountains. And now, Vaelric says, they've made theirs. The fire keeps spreading. Even through the rain. They descend the mountain trail in silence, while war horns echo through the valley below. The sound moves strangely through Carvane's cliffs, sometimes distant, sometimes close enough to feel inside the chest. Vaelric remembers this trail. He trained here as a boy during winter patrol drills. The torches along the old stone steps used to burn through every storm. Tonight half of them are dead. Inside the watchtower, the air smells of wet fur, smoke, and cold iron. A younger warrior slams the heavy door shut behind them. The sound echoes upward through the stairwell, too loud, and everyone flinches. Vaelric notices that too. Panic spreads quickly once men begin imagining enemies where there are none. Rowan tosses a cloth toward him without a word. Vaelric catches it. Blood soaks through the fabric wrapped around his palm almost immediately. Nobody offers more help after that. Near the far wall, two guards begin stripping silver wolf banners from the stone pillars. Quietly, efficiently, one removes the crest of House Vaelric from above the hearth. The metal hooks scrape against stone. He watches the banner fold inward on itself before disappearing beneath the guard's arm. Another thing erased. The room feels smaller afterward. A gust pushes rain through the arrow slits. Firelight flickers. Down below, Vaelric burns harder. Flames spread along the eastern terraces, near the river district. Even through the storm, the city glows red across the wet mountainside. A soldier mutters near the stairwell. They breached faster than the scout said. Vaelric pulls off his gloves slowly. Enough. The soldier goes silent. Vaelric leans against the cold stone beside the window. Every muscle in his body aches from the fall on the ridge. The pain barely registers anymore. His attention stays on the city, on the smoke thickening above the walls. A memory moves through him without warning. Children running beneath lanterns in the lower market, winter musicians outside the southern bridge, gold banners above the palace towers during Ascension Week. Now, Ash climbs over all of it. Boots scrape behind him. Rowan. Vaelric doesn't turn. You should sleep. The words land like something said out of habit rather than belief. Vaelric presses the cloth harder against his palm. Did you know before tonight? A long pause. The storm rattles the shutters. Yes. Rowan's voice barely carries above the wind. Vaelric closes his eyes once. Not long. Just enough. When he opens them, the city is still burning. What did they promise you? Nothing. Too fast. Vaelric turns then. Rowan stands near the center table beneath dim firelight, shoulders rigid, jaw locked tight. The others in the room pretend not to listen. Every one of them listens, anyway. The council believed removing you would calm the provinces. Rowan's voice has the careful quality of a man rehearsing truth he doesn't fully trust. The eastern territories were already turning. Border houses stopped answering royal summons weeks ago. Merchants were pulling guards off trade roads. Half the nobles in Vaelric believed civil war was coming before winter. And they blamed me. Nobody answers immediately. That silence says more than the words did. One of the younger warriors keeps his eyes fixed on the floorboards. Another quietly removes the silver clasp from his cloak and slips it into his pocket. More disappearing. Vaelric watches it happen. The room changes around him piece by piece. Not violently. Worse. Carefully. Like people trying to survive something before admitting it exists. Rowan steps closer to the fire. The council thought if the succession ended cleanly, his throat tightens briefly, the kingdom would stabilize. Vaelric studies him for a long moment, then past him, then toward the window where Valdrin burns below. They were afraid. Rowan says nothing, which means yes. Not hatred. Not revenge. Fear. That lands differently than anything else has tonight. Fear makes men betray slowly, methodically. Fear strips banners from walls before blood ever touches the floor. Vaelric looks toward Blackmere Fortress, visible faintly across the western cliffs. Even from here, the upper towers are dark. No royal beacon burns above the fortress. And then the detail reaches him. The Silver Wolf standard above the western gate is gone too. His chest tightens once. Sharp. Controlled. Blackmere already removed him. Not tomorrow. Not after judgment. Already. A log collapses inside the hearth. Embers drift upward. Nobody moves. The silence stretches long enough to become physical, something you could press your hand against. Then Rowan lifts his eyes fully. There's more. Vaelric waits. The fire snaps between them. The council didn't act because of the war. A horn echoes across the mountains outside. Closer again. They acted because of what was said. Rowan pauses, like he's deciding how much to carry. About the night you were born. The firelight shifts across his face, and the room goes very, very still. Vaelric's answer comes soft. Careful. That softness unsettles the room more than shouting would. Rowan glances once toward Vaelric. The commander stands near the stairwell, hands clasped behind his back, jaw set beneath the torchlight. He doesn't interrupt. That alone changes everything. Rowan exhales. The black moon appeared over Blackmere the same night the western river flooded. His voice drops further. 3 villages drowned before sunrise. The elders never stopped talking about it after. Vaelric turns away before Rowan finishes. Not out of surprise. Out of exhaustion. He's heard pieces of this his entire life. Servants falling silent when he entered rooms. Noble women touching silver charms when he passed during court ceremonies. Officers watching him too carefully in council meetings. Stories never disappear in Vareth. They wait. Outside, another horn echoes through the mountains. Closer now. A younger warrior climbs the stairwell toward the upper watch platform 2 steps at a time. Vaelric stares through the narrow slit overlooking the valley. Smoke drifts over the eastern districts in thick ribbons. Through the rain, he can see movement along the lower roads outside the walls. Too much movement. Not fleeing civilians. Organized lines. Torches. Steel. His fingers tighten against the stone. They're already at the river crossings. The words leave his mouth before he realizes he's spoken aloud. Vaelric moves to the window beside him. His expression darkens immediately. That's impossible. No, Vaelric says. It isn't. He watches the torch lines below. Not random. Disciplined. They move like men who already know the terrain. The scout returns from the upper platform breathing hard. They breach the southern barriers. Nobody answers him at first, because everyone inside the tower understands what that means. The southern barriers are nearly 40 miles from Valdrin. Stone choke points. Defensive trenches. Narrow mountain passes designed to hold armies for weeks. Not hours. Vaelric steps forward sharply. How many banners? Couldn't count through the storm. The scout swallows. But House Mordain is already pushing through the river roads. A quiet curse near the hearth. Another man's knuckles pale against the edge of the table. Vaelric keeps his voice level. They knew the weak routes. Nobody argues. Nobody can. The southern passes should have slowed them for days, Rowan mutters. Vaelric looks at him. But they didn't. The wolves begin pacing again. One scratches at the floorboards near the door. Restless. Searching for something solid. Outside. Distant thunder rolls through the mountains. Beneath it, wagon wheels.
Hundreds of them.
Refugees climbing north through the lower roads beneath Carvain. The tower suddenly feels exposed. A sharp knock slams against the outer door. Every man in the room reaches for steel. The wolves snap toward the sound. Another knock. Vaelric nods once. Rowan opens the door carefully. A scout stumbles inside, mud to his knees, blood soaking through his riding coat, cold night air rushing in behind him carrying smoke from the valley. He breathes like a man who ran the last mile on nothing but fear. Riverwatch is gone, he says. The room tightens. Say it clearly, Vaelric says. The scout wipes rain from his eyes. They didn't just attack the crossings. His chest heaves. They bypass them. House Mordain already controls the eastern roads leading into Valdren. No one speaks. The fire cracks softly. Vaelric feels his pulse slow instead of rise. That's worse. Slowing means certainty. This is no rushed invasion. No reckless assault. Someone showed them where to move. The scout reaches inside his coat with shaking hands. Every sword in the room lifts slightly. Easy, he rasps. He pulls out a soaked parchment folded around a broken black seal. Vaelric takes it first. His eyes scan the contents once. Then again. The color leaves his face. Vaelric watches Rowan notice it too. What is it? Vaelric doesn't answer immediately. That hesitation drags across the room like wire. He hands the parchment over. Rowan unfolds it beside the firelight. His expression changes before he's finished reading. No. Vaelric steps closer. Rough charcoal sketches fill the parchment. Profiles. Physical descriptions. Military notations. And at the center, a face. Not perfectly drawn, but close enough. Below it, identifying details. Height.
Build.
Fighting style. Then Vaelric sees the final line written beneath the collar. Scar beneath left collarbone. His stomach tightens.
Very few people know about that scar.
A blade wound from childhood training inside Blackmir's lower arena. Hidden beneath armor. Hidden beneath formal dress. Hidden always. Private.
Buried.
He lifts his eyes slowly from the parchment. Nobody in the room can hold his stare. Because now the truth is breathing between all of them, and no one knows what to do with it. House Mordain isn't searching for a kingdom. House Mordain is searching for him. And somewhere inside House Vaelor, someone is feeding them everything they need. Vaelric lowers the parchment onto the table. Nobody reaches for it again. The charcoal sketch stares upward through the firelight. The scar notation. The wet fingerprints smudged across the edges. He presses two fingers unconsciously against the place beneath his tunic. The old wound aches. Not from injury. From memory. Wind pushes rain through the arrow slits. The valley below burns harder. Outside the tower, horses scream along the northern road. Not war horses, civilian wagons, people who ran too late. Vaelric moves toward the stairwell without announcing it. Nobody stops him. The lower chamber sits half buried in the mountain, older than the tower above it. Cold air rises carrying damp ash and ancient cedar oil. Abandoned weapon racks. Old patrol blankets folded exactly where soldiers left them during snow season. Nothing here changed. That almost hurts more than everything else. His hand finds the carved stone near the doorway. Deep claw marks run across the surface. Training scars from wolf initiation ceremonies decades earlier. He stood here at 12 winters. Veterans painted silver ash across his forehead beneath chanting torchlight. Frost Ascension. The first night, he wore the colors of House Vaelor. His father stood beside him. King Thorn's hand resting heavy against the back of his neck, while snow blew through the fortress gates outside. You bow for no man because of his title, only for what he endures. Vaelric stares at the claw marks now. Water drips steadily from somewhere deeper in the chamber. The memory surfaces without permission, Blackmir's winter courtyard covered in white frost. A younger Rowan grinning through split lips after sparring drills. Royal banners snapping above the fortress walls. His little brother racing through snow with a wooden sword far too large for him. Warmth from the kitchens drifting through the halls before dawn. For one dangerous second, the memories feel close enough to touch. Then screams from Vaelric rise faintly through the storm above. Reality crashes back. Vaelric grips the edge of the stone table hard enough for his knuckles to pale. Every piece of that life is collapsing at once. Not stolen in battle. Given away. His eyes find the object near the far wall, a ceremonial shield beneath a dust cloth. Silver wolf crest at the center. The old Frost Ascension shield. He walks toward it slowly. His reflection stares back, distorted across the worn metal. Older than he remembers. Rain-soaked. Blood drying near his collar. Eyes darker now. And then his father again. Not as king. As a man kneeling beside him in Blackmir's lower arena, tightening cloth around the wound beneath his collarbone. Strength isn't forcing men to fear you. Any brute can do that. He tied the knot firmly. Real rulers carry what breaks everyone else. Above him, boots move across the floor. Voices. Urgent. The war climbing closer. Vaelric looks at the shield. Then at the stairwell. Then back at the silver wolf. A thought begins forming slowly beneath the exhaustion. Not sudden. Patient. The prophecy. The counsel. The stories whispered since his birth.
Too convenient.
Too useful. Another horn sounds through the mountains. And for the first time, he begins wondering whether the prophecy was ever meant to protect Vaelric at all. By the time he climbs back to the upper chamber, the voices have sharpened into argument. The western barricades won't hold another night. That road should have been sealed already. Explain how Mordain outriders reached the lower terraces before midnight. He steps into the room. Silence cuts across it instantly. The fire burns lower. Smoke hangs thick beneath the rafters. Wet cloaks steam beside the hearth while exhausted wolves pace between their handlers, searching for calm that no longer exists anywhere in this room. Vaelric stands over the war table with both palms flat against the wood. Maps scattered beneath iron cups and hastily marked troop routes. Every line pointing inward, toward collapse. Rowan notices Vaelric first. Something shifts in his expression before hardening again. Vaelric walks to the table. His eyes move across the military markings. Eastern roads compromised. Southern barriers breached. River districts overrun. Then one final notation. 3 days. Written beside the central wall defenses of Vaelric. Nobody explains it. Nobody needs to. Vaelric looks up at Vaelric. You already know the city won't survive. We know the outer districts are lost. That isn't what I said. Vaelric says nothing. Another silence. Not strategic. Not tired. Afraid of being seen. Rowan reaches for a map.
Stops.
His fingers curl against the table edge instead. There were winters when northern villages stopped receiving grain shipments. The room stills completely. Vaelric turns slowly toward him. Rain crackles against the shutters. One of the wolves whines near the hearth before lowering itself against the floor. Rowan keeps staring at the map while he speaks. The famine years hit the border territories first. Carvain, Velrose, the lower mining settlements north of Blackmir. His voice grows rougher. The council claims supply roads collapsed beneath the storms. Vaelric knows the story, or thinks he does. He remembers starving refugees arriving outside Blackmir when he was 15. Children wrapped in torn furs. Mothers begging the outer guards for flour sacks frozen nearly solid. His father ordered the gates opened against the council's objections. Vaelric remembers that too. Rowan finally lifts his eyes. The roads never collapsed. The words land heavier than shouting. One of the younger warriors lowers his cup slowly onto the table. The elder houses redirected the grain south, Rowan says quietly. Vaelric stayed fed. The noble districts stayed calm. The northern villages. His throat tightens. Where sacrifice before panic could spread through the capital. The fire snaps. Nobody breathes loudly enough to interrupt it. Cold settles through Vaelric in layers. Not shock. Recognition. Pieces aligning backward through years he no longer trusts. The missing caravans, he says. Rowan nods. The council ordered the records burned afterward. The memory strikes hard. A locked archive chamber beneath Blackmir, dust-covered ledgers behind collapsed shelving, shipment records with council seals, numbers altered by hand. He held those papers beneath torchlight while snow battered the walls outside. He understood then. Entire villages had vanished from official census rolls after the famine winters ended. Not relocated, removed.
He found the truth at 16.
Confronted King Thorn that same night. His hand tightens against the table's edge. You knew. I learned later. But you stayed. A muscle jumps in Rowan's jaw. What would exposing it have done? The border houses were already unstable. If the famine records went public, they let children starve. The sentence cuts through the room like steel. Nobody looks at Vaelric after that, because they all know he's right. The storm grows louder. Wind pushes smoke sideways through the chamber. He sees it now with brutal clarity. The prophecy, the whispers around his birth, the sudden fear whenever he questioned the council. Not because he would destroy Vaereth, because he would uncover it. Because once he saw what the ruling houses truly were, he stopped obeying quietly. Every political setback after that changes shape inside his memory. Training commands revoked. Council invitations withdrawn. Marriage alliances collapsing without explanation. Exile was never punishment. It was containment. Vaelric steps back from the table before the anger turns reckless. He braces one hand against the cold stone wall beside the window and stares at Valdren burning below. Entire sections near the southern terraces disappearing beneath smoke. 3 days. Maybe less. Rowan speaks again behind him. The prophecy gave them justification. Vaelric lets out a quiet breath.
No.
He watches flames spread across the capital beneath the storm. It gave them cover. 3 sharp knocks hit the tower door below. Not frantic. Measured. Official. Every warrior reaches for steel instantly. Malrek descends first. The rest follow. Vaelric stays near the window, staring into the burning valley as bolts scrape open below. Muted voices drift upward. Then silence. Too much silence. Footsteps return slowly up the stairwell. Malrek appears carrying a black wooden case bound in silver cord. Rainwater drips from the lid. Nobody speaks as he places it onto the war table. Vaelric recognizes the royal seal burned into the wood before Malrek touches the clasp. House Vaelor. His father's mark. The commander doesn't look at him while unfastening the cord. The rite of severance arrived from Blackmere Fortress. The younger warriors, near the hearth, shift uneasily. One steps backward as if distance alone might lessen what sits on the table. Malrek opens the clasps. The sound cuts through the room sharper than any blade drawn tonight. Inside rests a folded parchment beneath a silver chain and a ceremonial dagger carved from dark obsidian. Ancient symbols along the blade's edge, nearly hidden beneath age-blackened oil. Severance steel, used only during blood removals from the royal line. Even the wolves react. One presses itself against the floor with ears flat. Another lets out a single, quiet warning sound before going still. Malrek unfolds the parchment. His voice echoes low through the chamber. By authority of the throne of Vaereth and under witness of the elder houses, Vaelric Thorn of House Vaelor is stripped of succession, military inheritance, territorial claim, and blood right under the rite of severance. The fire cracks softly. All oaths sworn in his name are dissolved. All protections granted by crown or fortress are withdrawn. Any house offering sanctuary beyond this decree stands in defiance of the throne itself. Vaelric keeps staring at the burning valley. The Black Moon heir no longer speaks for Vaereth. That sentence lands differently. Not ceremonial. Not symbolic. Practical. This is not exile. This is proof. Proof meant for someone waiting beyond the mountains. One of the younger warriors speaks quietly. If House Mordain demanded it, nobody tells him to stop. Another lowers his eyes near the stairwell. They breach the barriers too easily. Vaelric turns from the window. The firelight catches the blood drying at his collar. The exhaustion carved into his face. You think surrendering me stops this? No one answers. Which means yes. Rowan steps forward sharply. That's not what this is. Then what is it?
Come.
No edge to it. That's what makes it cut deeper. Rowan falters for half a second. And in that hesitation, the others begin thinking aloud. Not cruelly, not coldly, but with the desperate logic of exhausted men searching for any exit that doesn't require courage. If the southern houses came for him specifically, they're already inside the eastern districts. The city won't survive 3 days. What if handing him over buys time? Vaelric studies each face. Men he trained beside. Men who once swore blood oaths beneath Blackmir's winter banners. Their eyes aren't cruel. That makes it worse. Vaelric folds the decree. The southern envoy sent terms before the first breach. Silence falls hard. They demanded confirmation the heir had been removed from succession before negotiations could continue. There it is. The invasion and the exile tied together from the beginning. Vaelric feels something settle cold and final inside him. His father is bargaining. Not with armies. With him. Another horn. Much closer now. The tower trembles faintly beneath distant impact somewhere along the lower roads. A younger warrior grips the table. If surrender saves Valdrin. Rowan slams his palm against the wood. You think Mordain stops after one death? No one answers. Because no one knows. Rain drips steadily from the ceiling stones. The sound fills the chamber between breaths. Vaelric walks to the war table. Every eye follows. He looks down at the severance dagger. Obsidian blade. Royal symbols. A weapon meant to erase bloodlines cleanly enough for history to survive afterward. His father chose this blade himself. That realization settles deepest. He reaches toward the table. Several men tense instantly. He takes the parchment instead. The paper crackles in his hand. Outside, flames continue swallowing Valdrin. Refugees flood the northern roads beneath the ridge. The room waits for rage. For threats. For something to push against. Instead, Vaelric looks around the chamber quietly. At Rowan. At the frightened younger warriors. At the wolves lying restless beside men too exhausted to trust each other anymore. He sets the decree back down. If my death truly saves Vareth. Level. Controlled. That frightens them more than fury ever could. His eyes settle on Vaelric. Then stop waiting for my father to order it. The words stay suspended over the table. No one reaches for the dagger. No one reaches for him. The storm presses harder against the tower walls. Smoke drifts through the upper arrow slits in slow black ribbons, burning oil reaching them now. Closer than before. Much closer. Rowan stares at him like he no longer recognizes what he's looking at. A heavy impact rolls through the mountains. Somewhere below, another defensive line gives way. One of the younger warriors turns toward the sound. Southern siege rams. Nobody corrects him. Vaelric folds the right of severance back into the black case. Too careful. Like touching something he doesn't want to be responsible for. Before he can secure the clasps, frantic knocking slams the tower door below. Not measured. Desperate. Several wolves surge upright. Steel scrapes free. Vaelric signals. Rowan descends with 2 guards close behind. Strained voices beneath the stairwell. Then boots dragging heavily against stone. Rowan reappears carrying a blood-soaked royal courier across his shoulders. The man barely looks alive. Riding leathers torn open near the ribs. Dark blood continuing to move through his fingers. Mud caked to his knees. One side of his face burned raw. Blackmir colors still clinging to his cloak. Barely. The younger warriors clear space near the hearth. The courier grips Rowan's wrist before he's even fully lowered. Gate. Blood in his mouth. The southern gate. Hold still, Rowan says. The man's eyes dart around the chamber until they find Vaelric. Recognition. Not surprise. Relief. He tries to push himself upright. My prince. Vaelric cuts across sharply. He no longer carries that title. The courier looks at him in confusion. Then toward the black case on the table. Understanding arrives slowly. His shoulders sink. No. The room goes quiet again. War horns echo through the mountainside, now loud enough to tremble the beams overhead. The courier forces himself to continue. They breach the inner trade walls before dawn. Shallow breaths between each word. Blackmir reinforcements never arrived. Vaelric steps forward despite himself. Why? The courier looks at him directly. For the first time tonight, someone does. Council vote fractured. Another painful breath. Half demanded surrender talks with House Mordain before deploying the Northern Legions. And the king? Silence. The courier swallows blood. Rain lashes the windows. King Thorn refused to condemn you publicly. The chamber stills. Even the wolves stop moving. He also refused to defend you. Vaelric absorbs that without moving. Not rage. Not relief. Something far harder to carry. The courier's eyes drift toward the fire. The council demanded a declaration before the rite passed. They wanted the king to denounce you as a threat to Vareth. His voice weakens. He wouldn't. A log collapses softly inside the hearth. Sparks rise and fade. But he wouldn't stop them either. Not betrayal clean enough to hate. Not loyalty strong enough to save him. Weakness. Vaelric looks away sharply toward the burning valley beyond the window. His father saw the council turning toward fear and sacrifice and political erasure, and stood still while it happened. That hollows something inside him more completely than hatred ever could. You cannot fight weakness the same way you fight cruelty. The courier coughs against the blanket. The king kept delaying deployment orders, arguing, stalling, trying to hold the elder houses together. His eyes close briefly. By the time the vote passed, another distant impact shakes the ridge. Closer. Valdarin dying while councils hesitate, while kings wait. Vaelric presses one hand against the cold wall. All his anger loses shape. Malrek steps beside him near the window, voice low enough that only Vaelric hears it. The southern envoys reopen negotiations at sunrise. A pause. If surrendering you ends this before the capital falls. He doesn't finish. But he doesn't need to. The council hall smells like smoke that refuses to leave. Old war banners hang half-burned, swaying in the cold draft bleeding through broken, stained glass. Ash covers the stone floor. Every breath tastes like something that already ended. Fear is no longer sharp here. It's tired. Exhaustion sits behind Vaelric's ribs like a second heartbeat. Malrek steps closer. Palms open. Voice tight with a desperation he's trying to keep controlled. If you go out there as heir, they will make an example of you. If you go as a man willing to yield. A yield. Vaelric repeats the word quietly, like he's testing what it weighs. Outside, distant metal shouts echo through Valdarin's upper terraces. Not yet inside, but close enough that the walls feel like they're listening. Malrek pushes harder. There is no mercy in legends. Only in negotiations. We still have time. Vaelric finally looks at him. Not angry. Not desperate. Just seeing.
No.
One word.
Flat.
Absolute. Something in Malrek falters. Vaelric turns before the silence can soften him. His gaze drops to his chest, the royal wolf crest pinned over black warcloth. Golden fong. Vaelor sigil. Carved to signify the future king of House Vaelor. He has worn it since he was old enough to stand straight. His fingers rise slowly. They hover. The hall goes quiet in that particular way before a decision becomes irreversible. He grips the crest. Metal bites skin. It resists, the way identity always does when it's being forced to end. A sharp tear of fabric. The crest comes free. For a moment, he just stares at it in his palm. The symbol of every oath he never chose. Every expectation written before he could speak. Every future decided by other men in rooms he wasn't allowed to enter. He doesn't throw it. He lowers it to the stone floor.
Slowly.
Deliberately. And presses it down. Until the weight of House Vaelor's future heir rests beneath his hand like something already dead. Silence spreads through the chamber. Even Malrek stops breathing. Vaelric's voice comes barely above a whisper. I was never your future king. And then he crushes it. The sound is small, but it lands like a kingdom breaking. Something shifts in the room. Not political. Not strategic. A severance. Malrek steps forward. Vaelric. Don't do this. Vaelric straightens. For the first time, there is no crown in the air between them. No path. No negotiated mercy waiting at the end of compliance. Only truth. There is no surrender, he says. Only delay. His voice tightens, not with anger, but with the clarity that hurts to hold. Valdarin doesn't survive on promises. It survives on control, on examples, on erased names. A distant horn sounds outside. The walls vibrate with it. Vaelric shakes his head. Then what are you doing? Vaelric looks down at his empty hands, at the shattered crest beneath his boot, ending the part of me that believed there was another option. He turns toward the side chamber where the old armory doors stand half open, forgotten since the first evacuation order. Rusted hinges. Cold air bleeding through the gaps, like breath from something waking. Vaelric's voice follows him. Smaller now. If you pick up a weapon, there is no coming back. Vaelric pauses. Just once. And in that pause, a realization. Not like revelation, like recognition. There never was a way back. Not after exile. Not after the betrayal on the ridge. Not after every quiet decision that had already stripped him piece by piece long before tonight.
He walks.
Each step sounds different now. Not heir. Not future. Not symbol. Something else. Something that doesn't have a name yet. Inside the armory the air is colder. Rows of weapons like unanswered prayers. He moves past ceremonial blades, past training steel, until his fingers close around something real. Something used. The weight settles into his grip as if it remembers him. Outside, the horn sounds again. Much closer. Shouts ripple through Valdarin's upper gates. The siege is no longer approaching. It is arriving. Vaelric appears at the armory doorway. Breath uneven. Vaelric. This will be war. Vaelric adjusts his grip. The weapon aligns with his arm like it was waiting. I know. And for the first time all night, there is no hesitation in his voice. Only direction. He steps out of the armory. Cold air hits his face like judgment. Iron boots thunder somewhere beyond the walls. Guards shouting orders. Steel being drawn. The kingdom waking into its breaking point. Vaelric reaches out, but stops. Because Vaelric is already past him. Already changed. Already past anything that could have been saved. He pushes open the outer doors. And as the first line of soldiers turns toward him, recognizing what they're looking at, Vaelric raises the weapon and speaks one final truth into the rising chaos. There is no future king. A beat of stunned silence follows. Then the first blade is drawn in response. His first step out of the armory is met with steel. Not striking. Not yet. Just raised. A ring of Valdarin soldiers forms too quickly for panic to organize itself. Faces he once passed in training courtyards now holding something unfamiliar, recognition twisting into fear. Or certainty. Or both at once. He doesn't stop walking. The weapon hangs low. Ready. Behind him, Vaelric's voice tries to reach him and dissolves into the rising noise. Then, the evacuation bells stop. The sound cuts mid-wail. Not fading. Not breaking.
Stopping.
The absence is worse than the alarm was. For half a breath, the entire upper ridge of Valdarin seems to forget how to move. Then the kingdom reacts. Not as a unit. As fragments. Far below the stone terraces, the mountain roads ignite with motion. Refugees pouring from the inner districts, families clutching what they can carry, nobles without titles, guards without formation. The winding paths becoming rivers of panic, spilling into fog-choked valleys. Vaelric stands at the threshold of it all, watching the kingdom undo itself. The air smells like cold metal and oil lamps left burning too long. A child screams somewhere down the slope. Then another. Then the sound blends into a single living thing. Behind him, one of the soldiers lowers his weapon. Not surrendering. Just uncertain. Another follows. It spreads like hesitation, becoming contagious. A former captain, crest cracked, armor scorched from earlier skirmishes, steps forward from the line. He looks at Vaelric the way you look at something when you're trying to reconcile a myth with a man still breathing. You shouldn't be here, the captain says. Vaelric doesn't answer. The man looks past him toward the burning edges of Valdarin's defenses. Then back. Slowly, he lowers his blade. Not in defeat. In choice. One by one, others follow. Not all. Not cleanly. But enough. Enough that the line is no longer a line. It's something shifting. Something unstable. Something dangerous in a different way. Vaelric moves through it, and no one stops him. A strange pocket of quiet opens inside the chaos. Sound unsure whether it belongs. Then movement returns.
Changed.
Behind him, footsteps. Not from commands. Not from orders. Voluntary. First a handful. Then more. Men and women who once stood under Valdurin's banners, falling into pace behind the man who no longer carries its future. Vaelric feels it without turning. Not loyalty. Not yet. Displacement. The kingdom searching for something stable enough to stand near. At the edge of the upper ridge, wind cuts harder, carrying ash from the lower fires. Vaelric stops for the first time since the armory. Just once.
A breath.
The weight in his hand feels different now. Not lighter. Not heavier. Just real. Malrek catches up behind him, breath ragged, eyes scanning the movement forming behind Vaelric like an unplanned army. This is turning, Malrek says quietly. Not into order. Into fracture. Vaelric stares down the mountain roads where Valdurin spills itself into the wilderness. I know. A long silence. One that doesn't resolve anything. Only reveals how irreversible everything already is. Then, distant horns from the southern watchtowers. Not Valdurin's. Different rhythm. Wrong cadence. A scout bursts through the smoke-lined ridge path, nearly falling before he speaks. Armor dusted in ash. Voice breaking as he forces the words out. Southern force, massive formation, no insignia we recognize. He swallows. They're marching straight toward Carvain Ridge. The air changes. Not louder. Heavier. Vaelric looks south. And for the first time since the bells stopped, the direction of the world feels like it has chosen him back. He stands at the edge of Carvain Ridge as wind presses hard against his face, carrying ash, distant screams, and the weight of Valdurin collapsing behind him. The evacuation roads below are no longer roads. They are movement without direction. Bodies spilling into the valley, like something the mountain is rejecting. No bells ring. The silence they left behind is worse than their warning ever was. Behind him, the people who began following him no longer speak. Even Malrek has stopped trying to find meaning in what's happening. Everyone simply exists in the same direction now, pulled southward by something none of them have named yet. Vaelric doesn't look back at Valdurin. He already knows what he would see. Not a kingdom standing. A kingdom remembering it is broken. Something shifts in the way the wind moves. Not louder. Intentional. Across the ridge line, dark formations thread through distant mist. Not rushing. Not scattered. Focused. Malrek steps beside him. They are not just coming for the ridge. Vaelric doesn't respond immediately. The realization arrives without ceremony. They are not looking at Valdurin. They're looking at him. Something inside him tightens. Not fear. Not surprise. Recognition. The kingdom behind him fades. Valdurin is no longer something he can save or lose. It is something he has already left. I can't go back, Vaelric says quietly. Not a declaration. An observation. A truth that has finished forming. Nobody argues. He closes his eyes for a moment. Not in prayer. Not in grief. In acceptance of a distance that cannot be closed again. When he opens them, the ridge feels different. Not like an ending, like a boundary. He steps forward. Not toward Valdurin. Not away. Past it. Behind him, someone says his name like a question they're afraid of answering. No one stops him. The followers remain. But they're no longer following a future king. They're following a man without a crown walking into something no one has named yet. Vaelric adjusts his grip once. Then lowers it slightly. Not surrendering. Not threatening. Just ready. Malrek catches up briefly. If you leave them behind like this, there will be nothing left of the old order. Vaelric pauses for the briefest moment. Then answers without turning. Then it was never strong enough to survive me leaving.
He walks on.
Below, the southern formation sharpens into shape. Too organized for a raid. Too large for a border skirmish. And then, far ahead at the narrowing pass of Carvain Ridge, their vanguard slows. A rider separates from the front lines. Alone. Approaching. Vaelric stops. The wind falls strangely quiet around him, as if even the ridge is waiting to understand what this meeting means. The rider lifts a banner, not of conquest, of message-bearing authority. He stops at a distance that isn't respectful.
Precise.
His voice carries clearly across the stone. Vaelric of House Vaelor. The name lands differently now, not as inheritance, as target. The rider raises a sealed command scroll. Our orders are not to kill you.
A pause.
Long enough for meaning to sharpen, only to bring you back alive. Vaelric's expression doesn't change, but something behind his eyes tightens, quietly, dangerously. Because for the first time since Valdrin fell into chaos, the truth feels incomplete again. Not about the war, not about the kingdom, about him. And as the wind shifts between them across the silence of Carvane Ridge, Vaelric understands with unsettling clarity. He is not being hunted for what he did. He is being hunted for what he still is. And he has no idea yet what that means. Thanks for watching. If this story pulled you in, there's more waiting for you. Tap the thumbnail on your screen to continue the journey. And if you felt something while watching, don't just scroll away. Drop a like, leave a comment, and let your voice be part of the Alpha King dynasty. Your support keeps the story alive.